All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of these Lunch and Learn webinars. So this one's called The First 90 Days, the Critical Success Strategies for New Leaders at All Levels. Basically, it's a highlight summary of a great book by um, by Michael Watkins. And I don't usually promote books per se, so this one here is one that I find very, very valuable. I've had it on my shelves for over 10, 15 years, and I've personally used the content several times. So I thought I would offer this as one of the topics for the webinar and give you a little bit of a summary of the tips that the author talks about, as well as my own take on some of the applications of it. So the author basically walks through some of the most important elements of when you're new to a role. So what we mean by being new to a role, it could be you're in the same organization. So perhaps you got promoted to a new level, or you can also have something where you moved to a new company. Maybe it's a different job, maybe it's the same level or a different level, but you have this newness associated with the job that you're at. Okay. And the concept of the book has all to do with those critical first few months, 2, 3 months, which can often make or break how successful you're going to be and how well viewed you're going to be in that organization. So one of the first steps that the author talks about is promoting yourself. And the idea here, if you see, is letting go of your old job and embracing a new one. This is one of the most important elements because we all tend to kind of want to stay in our old job, right? So you were very, very good at what you were doing. Perhaps you got promoted in the same company, and there's always a tendency to want to go backwards again, right? So you were a good engineer, maybe now you're a manager or whatever the role happens to be. So there's a comfort level in what you used to do, and that's one of the biggest ones. That's one of the biggest factors in trying to fight, right? Trying to fight the element of wanting to go back. And if you ever have that situation, maybe not yourself, but you may have seen this in one of your bosses, that person sometimes can become a micromanager. And one of the reasons you can become a micromanager is this first bullet on the slide, which is they're comfortable in where they used to be, so they tend to play in that field over and over again, and they should be moving on, right? So work at the level that you are presently now assigned to, not the level that you were, right? So you did get promoted after all, so try and separate yourself, make sure you have the right person at your old role. And then there's even this concept of cultivating technical and political counsel, as well as getting personal advice. What does that mean? So I think when it comes to technical, people don't struggle with this part, right? So you have a new role. There's a reason you're in that field, whether it could be financial, it could be, technical, it could be a supply chain. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? So that part usually people think about it says, well, I need to know this part of my job to do my job properly. There's also a political element, and you're going to see that in a couple of slides later on, is what do the politics look like? Yeah. What is the political climate of where you presently are now being worked on, right? And do you understand that well enough to be successful in that role? Okay. And even things like personal advice. So do you have people that you can trust that you can go and ask questions to in order to make sure that you're not making some fatal flaws in those first couple of months? So one key consideration, there's quite a few, obviously, if you get the book, but one of them is to ask yourself the question, what has made you successful so far in your career? Can you succeed in your new position by relying solely on those strengths? So it's a little bit of a loaded question. You were successful for a certain reason, and especially if you were more at a junior level. And those things might not be as important anymore as you climb up to a new level or if you changed organization altogether, right? So it's to ask yourself that question, whatever made you successful to begin with that got you this new role, is that still the same traits and still the same techniques that you need going forward? All right. Number two is accelerate your learning. So you're at a new role. You could be in a new department. You could be in a new organization, a new company, whatever the case may be. So here it's all about learning. So you need to learn enough about this new quote unquote area that you're in, especially if you've changed companies, right? So if you're in a new company, you really have to take some time in those first couple of months to learn about your organization. If you're in the same company, perhaps you change department, or perhaps you have different people you're dealing with now that you got promoted. So you need to learn about that level of the organization. And again, you see that the next bullet, balance technical with culture and politics. Most people tend to spend too much time on the technical aspect, the stuff that made them recognized and moving up in this level, for instance, right? This is saying you need to spend a bit of time on the culture and the politics. And so this is one of the ones that I personally forced myself, because I was one of those people who would tend to maybe gravitate towards the technical. So I tried to force myself, especially in those first few months, to try and learn what is different about the culture, what, the politics. Are there departments that don't like each other? Are there people that don't like each other? Are there certain uh, alliances that I need to know about? Those type of things have a lot of value, and you can't put it aside and say, well, I'll deal with it, later on. The beginning, those first couple of months, is really when you need to look into this element. Okay. So a couple of other tips. Effective learning, meaning what's going on, versus efficient. So efficient, you don't want to spend too much time getting into these things like culture and politics. So for instance, what's the best available sources of the insight? You A lot of times, and the author does a wonderful job of saying, you need to try and find people in your organization, not necessarily in your department. They're people around you that you trust. And so some of these people can point you in the right direction, or avoid you from making some fatal mistakes, for instance. One key consideration is, are you effective at learning about new organizations? Again, this is a question about challenging yourself. You may be the type of person that says, yeah, I love reading about organizations. I'll get on Google, I'll meet people in the hallway for a coffee. But if you're not, this is saying you need to try and do this, especially if you find yourself as being perhaps more of an introvert, right? Is saying, especially in those first few months, I need to get out there. I need to be in the kitchen, in the coffee area. I need to connect with people that I know at least a little bit, that can guide me and learn about this organization and this new level that I happen to be working on. Again, a little different whether your promotion or your new role is in the same company versus in a new company, but it's the same type of thinking. Match a strategy with the situation. Some of you have attended my other webinar, and there was this element called the STARS model, which also came from this book. So I won't get into it too much, but I'll give a highlight specifically with this section about strategy with situation. What does this mean? It means that you need to know where your company, or where let's say the main department, depending what kind of company you're at, where is your company presently in this model? And if you see the top right hand corner, it talks about, well, is it a startup operation? Is it in a sustaining mode? Perhaps it's struggling, so it's in a realignment phase. Perhaps it's struggling even more, in which case you're in a turnaround phase. And of course, ultimately, if you can't turn a business around, then you're in a shutdown phase. You need to know where your company is, or your department is, in these buckets, because you want to align your own department and your own role with this. There's nothing worse than, for instance, if a company is in a turnaround mode, which means something, right? The water is very, very high. That symbolic water is up to your nose, and you're struggling, and the company's not making any profits, perhaps. But you're running your department differently. You're spending money on things that perhaps the company doesn't value, or vice versa. You may be thinking about saving money and cost cutting, and meanwhile your company is in a growth phase, right? So that's what this section's about. It's aligning you and your strategy with the one of your company, depending where they are. So what you have here is a little, it's basically an overview, because there's a whole webinar that just speaks about this model, so I won't go through it in too much detail. But you have things like, if it's a startup, everybody knows what a startup means, right? You're there to build the structure. You're starting from scratch, right? There's no pre-existing rigidity. These are some of the traits of not only of the group or of the department or of the company, but also the type of people. And that's where this model comes in really handy, is the type of people that tend to be very successful in each of these phases, right? If if you have success after a startup operation, then you're in a sustaining mode again. So you're avoiding decisions leading to problems. You have strong teams already in place. People kind of know what you're doing. If you're in a realignment, you find there's a few hurdles and a few bumps along the way. So you need to make some changes. So an example there is convincing employees that a change is necessary. And turnaround means things have gotten even worse. You weren't able to, or the company wasn't able to realign. So here, a lot of the energy that you have to bring into a group is about re-energizing demoralized employees. They may be depressed, or they may be worried about their jobs, right? So one key consideration here is which of these skills and strengths are likely to be the most valuable in your new situation, and which have the potential to get you in trouble. So a lot of this section is about understanding where the company is at and understanding your own skills. So I'll go to the next slide in a second, but there are times where you're not perfectly suited to whatever phase the company's at. So it doesn't mean you can't be successful, but it does mean you need to surround yourself with the right people in order to make sure that those traits are filled by someone else. So let me show you an example here, right? So for example, if you are in a startup mode, if the company is in a startup mode or your department is, then what you do is you have these traits, like you like project structure with clear deadlines, you've got that entrepreneur spirit. Those are the type of people that have the most success in a startup operation. In the sustaining world, some of you have heard me use this concept of 80-20, right? So this is a 20 person, the person who's detail oriented, right? They're very, very good at setting up SOPs and standards, making sure people follow them, because you're in a sustaining mode of operation. If the company is in realignment phase, then it's really more about improving, a lot of root cause analysis. You're trying to change things. You're trying to find root causes. You're trying to find improvements to the business to try and realignment. Once you get to turnaround, things are getting a little bit bad. So now the people who tend to be successful are the 80%. Big picture, focus on the urgent, get fast results. Those one have the best success. And then unfortunately, it does happen, and when a company ends up shutting down, then you do need people who are good at shutting down an operation. So these people also tend to like project structure, but they're also able to deal with negative work environments, which is not for everybody, right? It can be a very tough place to work. So just to finish this part is, you may be looking at this and saying, well, that's all very nice. For instance, I personally may find myself gravitating towards the 80% element, the one of I can get things done, I can focus on the urgent and get fast results. So I'm best suited to turnaround. But what if I take on a role in a company where they're in a sustaining phase? So what does that mean? Well, all it means is A, I recognize that I may not have the strongest skills for that phase. And B, I need to make sure that I have some people in my team that have those skills. I surround myself with the right people to compensate for whatever gaps I have in my own skills. And the best example I can give to this group is, if you've ever been part of a young company, you have people who are there for startup, and then they stay there as it becomes a sustaining operation. And you'll notice right off the bat, you say, that's funny. These people were so good at startup and they're struggling now that we're no longer in startup phase. Yes, because in startup, you have this culture, some people call it like a cowboy culture. You just get it done, right? It's all about speed and getting it done and making it happen. But as soon as you're finished that phase and you're in sustaining, those people tend to struggle. It's not the same skills and some of the same traits that you need. Okay. Securing early wins. This is very important, right? It's something we just have to accept. Maybe it's not fair, but what it says is those first 2-3 months are very critical to demonstrate your skills and to demonstrate that you can pull it off, that you can come up with some wins, right? Some key principles. You want to find some early wins. You want to excite and energize your boss, your peers, your employees. You want to build your personal credibility, especially if you join the new company, right? They don't know you. So you don't have the luxury of time to say, I've got a year to build my credibility. You have to build something very quickly. There's a lot of change and a lot of learning that happens in this phase. And Some of you may be thinking, okay, well, that's easy to say. How do I get this early win? Well, part of this journey of these first 2, 3 months is to understand what the challenges are, right? What some of the problems are in your area. Once you look at it, don't try and bite off the biggest or the toughest problem, right? That may be your temptation. In that pool of projects or in that pool of opportunities, try and find something that's manageable, right? Something that is not necessarily easy, but something that can be done relatively quickly with some help from your group and has the highest probability of success. That's the one you want to focus on first. Once you get that win under your belt, people know that you're very motivated, you're results oriented, you can get success, and you built that credibility, and it buys you time for when you attack some of the bigger and harder problems that your department faces. One key consideration: how would you like to see people behave differently by the end of your time or your area in the organization? Include behaviors. So, in other words, a lot of the work we do and a lot of the improvements we do in life has to do with people's behaviors. So, what kind of behaviors would you like to see in your department and in your group? What kind of things would you like to see people doing as a just a natural behavioral way of working inside your department? Negotiate success is all about your relationship with your boss, your immediate supervisor. So it's a new role, again, with whether it's in the same company or a new company. So you have a new boss, right? So this is about understanding all of this. You could see some comments here on the slide talks about, well, again, you probably want to know what phase the company's in. Are we in realignment? Are we in sustaining, startup? Depending what's going on there, you probably need different support and different information from your boss, which might be things like what kind of things we need to change, what kind of things do I need to learn about the business, what kind of resources do I need. Regular communications with your boss. You need to find out if your boss is a formal or informal person, right? If your boss is formal, then he or she may want to say, yes, I want you to come in every Thursday at 3 o'clock, every Friday at 9. I want to have something in the calendar. I feel comfortable with that structure. If that person is informal, then they're probably not going to like the let's meet once a week approach, but rather the pop-ins, right? So they would be a person saying, yeah, just walking by the corridor a couple times a week, tell me how it's going, tell me questions you may have. So you need to find that out, right? You need to find out what kind of boss you now have. Soft skills, right? What kind of things, how are you going to work with your boss? What kind of negotiation skills, conflict management, all these type of great skills that you need to cultivate and get to learn your boss accordingly. One key consideration: create a plan for these conversations that you should have with your boss. Short and medium term success indicators. I know I had this reaction as well when I was looking at this chapter. It seems very almost like too rigid or very formalized. But if you don't do it right away, then you've almost set the tone for not having these conversations at all. So this is just about saying, I'm new to this department, I'm new to this role, I'm new to this company. I want to have, especially in the first 3 months, a regular touch point with you. Help me figure out what's the best frequency, help me figure out the best format, and what some of these expectations are from you to me, short and medium term. Okay, it's all about that conversation with your boss. Achieving alignment. So you see here, it's very much about strategy at this point, right? What's going to be your strategy? What structure are you going to have? What systems are you going to use? Granted, at the very, very beginning, you may not have the answers to these questions, but you have to start thinking about what you want your department to look like. Maybe a lot of it is still good, right? It doesn't mean everything's broken when you inherit a new role, but you have to ask yourself these questions: what kind of skills and what kind of culture that you're dealing with as well. So there's an analogy of a sailing trip, right? You need to know the destination, the route, what kind of boat do you have? How are you going to outfit it, the boat itself, and what's the mix of the crew? So these are analogies with this phase. One key consideration: so what are the functional and dysfunctional elements of your culture? So culture, as you've seen, comes up a lot, and sometimes it gets lumped in with politics or culture. But again, as you start seeing, again, whether it's your same company or new company, what is the culture of your department, of your people? Surely some things are very good, maybe some things are very negative. You want to understand that as soon as possible. A lot of you that are attending have a lot of experience, and you know that if the culture is wrong or if there's some things that you really need to clean up, it's best to do it right off the bat. Don't do it 6 months or a year later. You got to do that early, not late. Building your team. So, I mean, we have to be very mature about the contents of this slide. So let's take a look at this. It says avoid team building exercises until your final team is decided on. What that means is you've inherited people, possibly, maybe it's a technical role, so you don't have any direct reports, but assuming you have direct reports, you don't know if the people you have, you want to keep them all. So if you want to have some kind of team building exercise, whether it's a meal or something, you want to wait until you evaluate all your people first. So you want to meet one-on-one with your team members. You want to prepare questions. And the author even suggests coming up with these buckets or these categories, right? Is this someone you want to keep? Is this someone you want to keep but needs to be developed? Is this someone that really belongs in a different position? They're in the wrong position. Someone you're not sure of, so you need to observe. And then last but not least, maybe that person's not a good fit, period, and you need to replace them, okay, whether low or high priority. So you need to do that before you can come back and say, all right, I've now figured out my team. I'm going to have some kind of team building. I'm going to set some expectations, cultural, whatever the case may be. So you need to do that in the proper order. Key consideration, how do you plan to manage decision making? Will you start by consult and decide or build consensus? What does that mean? There's different models, and I won't get into it here, but you also need to set the tone of what kind of leader you want to be, right? So probably, which is the advice I would give, is there are certain situations where you need to make the decision because you are the boss. And there's some situations where you should give up that control to your team and have them make the decision. And there are times when you want to have some kind of a 50-50 relationship where we come up with a consensus. We're going to talk about it together. So you need to think through that and figure out what kind of leader you want to be. You don't want to become a micromanager, so you need to actually think through that if your tendency is to micromanage, right? What areas do I feel comfortable relinquishing that control to my people? Creating coalitions, right? So this one here, this also helped me tremendously, right? Because if you see the first bullet on the slide talks about, don't spend too much time vertically, which is what we do. We think about our bosses and our subordinates all the time. This whole purpose of the slide is to say horizontal is just as important because you're in a new level. You have new peers. You have people in other departments. Imagine you're working in a typical organization. You have people in finance. You have people in HR. You have people in warehousing and supplies. You need to know those people. They will make or break you as well. Okay. Elements of change management. How do I make sure that I can work properly with these people? And just understanding different attitudes that you may have of you being new to that role. So one key consideration, who are your potential supporters, potential opponents, and quote unquote convincibles? You may start seeing very, very quickly, within even a few weeks, that the people at your level might fall into one of these three buckets, right? And you might say, well, why would I have opponents? And it might not be anything personal, but maybe you're new in that role and that person had an issue with your predecessor or with your department. So you need to understand, all these people, especially horizontally, do I have any issues that I need to build up over the next couple of months to have a better relationship? Keeping your balance, right? This is just about prioritization. That's what this whole chapter is all about, right? So there's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to do, including the contents of the previous 8 steps. Try and understand which ones are important, which ones are vital, prioritize the strategies, have discipline to not spread yourself out too thin, pick the ones that are the most important, and then work through it, okay? One key consideration here is what are your priorities to strengthen your advice and counsel network? So again, you've seen this a couple of times. It's challenging us to have some checks and balances with other people in the organization. Who do I trust? Who do I consider a friendly face? And again, it might be someone new or someone that you've known for a long time that could tell you if you're kind of going off the deep end or if you're making an error. Okay. And then the last one is expedite everyone. So this one is just about, in my opinion, when I got to this part, it's about saying I've read the other 9 sections. Now I need to make my game plan. What does my game plan look like in terms of those steps and in terms of those first 3 months? Okay. And I'll show you an example of one that I kind of did as well. So I'll show you a snippet of this as well. So one key consideration, what can you do to better support the transitions of people who come in from the outside? But to me, the biggest part of this section is creating the plan. So if you bought into this philosophy, it's saying, look at these 9, 10 steps and figure out what your plan looks like. So as an example, again, this is just a little bit of a snapshot of what it would look like. You have the sections that you just saw, the first 9 or 10 sections. And then this is one of the ways I've done it in the past, right? There's what I want to do in the first day of this new role, the first week, the first month, second month, and the third month. And what you want to do is look through it. And you don't necessarily have to have, or at least in my opinion, you don't have to have something in each box, but it is to challenge you, especially those first 2 columns, first day and first week. What exactly do I want to do when I show up Monday morning? What do I want to do on that first Monday morning? And by the time I get to Friday, what do I want to have done? Very important, because you could start seeing slippage, right? Where you have a lot to do. So I'm just going to pick a couple and then we'll wrap up the webinar. So on the first day, perhaps you want to review the company group strategy. You want to think of the objectives and mandate of the new position. I've even seen examples, for instance, if you went from an operational role to a corporate role. So you might say, well, I need to look a little different. I need to have different clothing. I need to have a briefcase. I mean, whatever you think your image is going to be going forward, you need to identify right off the bat, right? You can't do that after the first week. You need to do that in the first day. So when you get to the first week, you might have things like looking at the org chart, reviewing KPIs, reviewing performance data, creating this detailed 90-day plan with your boss. So this is my plan, but now I also need to make a plan with my boss and get them aligned with the fact that I want to have some kind of contact over the next couple of months, right? You get the idea. As you move from left to right, you have yourself different game plans and different actions until you get to the last column, which is month 3. And before you're wondering, there's nothing magical about 90 days, but 3 months, in my experience, is a good uh, time frame to say this is what I want to do, and I can have that as a clear game plan going forward, so that I have the best chance for success in the organization. All right. All right. So I'm at the end of my time, ran maybe a couple minutes late. So basically, with Analyze and Improve, we apply some of these customized approaches in order to understand and solve issues, problems, opportunities. And part of that role that we use is to make sure people are successful in their present role and also in the new role. So I find this particular book, The First 90 Days, has a lot of great content. If you find this interesting, I suggest you pick up a copy. It includes that STARS model, which is amazing to not only challenge and understand yourself, but also figuring out what people should be in your organization, depending on what phase your company's in, right? So it's one of the concepts we use to try and drive improvement, try and connect with our clients. And it's actually part of a bigger package for us, which is social leadership, especially with not only frontline supervisors, but also with managers. Okay. So I will stop here. I will open it up for any questions that people may have. You can either unmute your line or type it up, whatever you wish. Okay, well, thank you for all the thumbs up. I don't see questions. Rova. Oh, has left the meeting. Okay, maybe he was just giving a thumbs up. Well, you know where to find me. If you do have a question, you can give me a call. You also have that email, contact@analyzeandimprove.com. And I want to thank you again for spending your lunch half hour with us. And have a great day.
Thanks, Carmine. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks.
Have a good day, Carmen. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.